Hello and good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. We are coming to you live from the Central Building in the heart of our city, Kampala, live on our website, www.radio1fm90.com. You look for the icon with the word Listen Live. You can also find us on your TV set if you have a DSTV connection. You look for audio channel 897. Now, Radio 1 is also live on the different radio listening apps, which you can obtain from the apps of your smartphone. Download, look for Radio 1 FM 90. And I can assure you, as long as you have an internet connection, you'll be able to listen to us from anywhere across this globe. My name is Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, your host, and today we'll be looking at football development and management in Uganda. Well, we know football is one of those things that unites Ugandans across the board. When it comes to football, for instance, right now we are hosting Chan, and you saw what happened on Monday at Nambole. There were so many people, vehicles bringing in people as far as those deep village places to come to Nambole to watch that very important match between Uganda and Algeria. Unfortunately, we lost that match by 3 goals. It's part of the ongoing Chan that we are hosting with our colleagues in the East African community, and it's seen as a rehearsal for what will happen in the AFCON in the 2027, where we'll be hosting it with Tanzania, Kenya, and what is known as the Umoja arrangement. Now, let's look at some facts about Ugandan football. In terms of ranking, Uganda is ranked 88th out of 211 countries by FIFA. In the region, we are followed by Kenya, by Tanzania, which is at the position of 103. Kenya comes in at 109, Rwanda 127th. In terms of the leagues in Africa, we are not even among the top 20. In the region, according to the ranking, Tanzania has the best league, followed by DRC, Congo, and Sudan. Egypt, Morocco, and Algeria have the top 3 strongest leagues in the region. Now, the best moment in Ugandan football in modern times is when we qualified for the African Cup of Nations in 2017 after 39-year absence from the tournament. But we should remember that we did reach the African Cup of Nations finals in 1978, and we were beaten then by Ghana 2-0. Uganda has struggled to qualify for the FIFA World Cup tournament, and our qualification efforts always end in mathematical calculations. We're always hoping the other team will beat the other one, or the other one will lose for us to have an edge. Good enough, the under-17 national team has made history. That team is known as the Cubs. They will be going to the World Cup very soon. That's for the under-17. Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania are hosting this Chan tournament, and we hope everything will go well. So Ugandans have been talking about football, and like I already told you, it's one of the most important things that we love following, something that brings us together. So what exactly is the problem? How can we improve our football? I have a panel of 3 journalists who spend their time handling issues to do with football. Let me introduce them. Mr. Ismail Dakawa Chigongo is the head of Sports Nation Media. Good evening, Ismas. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Kenneth. Glad to be on Radio 1 after all these years.
Thank you
so much. My first time in 8 years.
Thank you so much for turning up. Mr. Darren Alan Chieyune is a sports journalist also with Nation Media. Good evening, Alan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening to you, Kenneth, and the listeners. Happy to be here at an awkward hour.
Why would you call it awkward? You're always sleeping around this time.
So when Ismail left the locker room 8 years ago, somewhere, somehow, I was the de facto substitute. If I recall, my very first weekend officially here, Uganda qualified to return to the Africa Cup of Nations on September the 4th, 2016. September the 3rd was my first show officially here for the locker room. And that's why I state it's an awkward hour.
You always hear
and quite ironic that the 3 of us are now here.
You're all here
in an unofficial or official manner, but we are here.
I must say it's good to be back home, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you. Well, the other panelist is John Torach. John Torach is a colleague here. You normally hear him in the morning, but he also hosts our prime sports show, The Locker Room, every Saturday. John, it's a pleasure having you on Spectrum.
Thank you, Kenneth. Good evening to the listeners.
Well, when I saw the flyer moving around on social media, some people were saying, you've given these people little time. They have so much to tell us, which implies that in terms of punditry, I have the best team in studio today. Well, gentlemen, let's get started. First of all, football, as I've already said, it's one of those things that brings us together as a country, and the passion, the interest. And no wonder today we are discussing it on Spectrum. And I want to begin with you, Isma Dakabachigongo. And we should begin with the news. Algeria beating Uganda. Let's get your reaction. What came to your mind?
First of all, expected. Algeria are ranked much higher. And these days they're on quite a streak. They've beaten Uganda. This was the 6th game in a row. And that includes World Cup qualifiers and all the other games. They were also winning their 7th successive group stage game at the CHAN. However, football is one of the biggest equalizers in life or sport, that you don't need to come from a very great background. When you need to take your child to the best school in the world, or the most expensive in Eton in the UK, you need £70,000 a year. When you have talent in sports, you'll equalize so many things. Sport can take you from growing up in a favela in Brazil to rubbing shoulders with the richest kids at the Banab or the Emirates. And I brought that analogy just to emphasize that while I insist that Algeria are a much better team than Uganda, that at kickoff I could have bet anything on Algeria winning the game, doesn't mean that there are things that there aren't things Uganda could have done on the day to get a result. In the end, I thought Uganda's execution was very poor, especially offensively. And after conceding the goal and then trying to get back into the game, they lost their structure and eventually conceded the second and third. In the end, very disappointing in the manner in which the game went, especially when your co-hosts, you want to have a fairy tale. We've seen, I think, at many tournaments where the host team may not be very good, but buoyed by 40,000 or 70,000 in the stands and the entire country behind them, they tend to push way beyond their limits. In Uganda Crane's case, we did not see that. There wasn't anything that showed that the players played way out of their abilities or their skins just to deliver the result. So the start, in the end, very disappointing, but for me, largely expected.
John Torach, you two would like to hear your reactions. You saw the team sheet coming out. You saw the players that Uganda Cranes had put forward. You saw the ones in Algeria. And then eventually you witnessed the results.
Yeah, but just like Ismail, I wasn't surprised, frankly speaking. I mean, Algeria is a top 5 side in Africa when you're talking about the national teams, yeah? But also when it comes to the leagues, which, by the way, for all intents and purposes, I think this tournament, the CHAN tournament, could be described as a state of the nation address of each nation's league. Because this is the one that reflects on the ground what your football structures are like.
Because these are local players.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And this in many ways is the most accurate depiction of how good the football ecosystem in a country is. It's a very important, and I hope going forward it keeps growing from strength to strength, because it's incredibly reflective of what's happening. That's why you can see that Tanzania, as lowly ranked as they are compared to us globally, they are top 10 in Africa in terms of the league. In fact, highest ranked, even higher than DRC.
And their first match, they beat Burkina Faso.
Yes.
2-0.
Exactly. And it begins to reflect in that sense. We do get the benefit of what can only be called doping every time we get our international team, because we get to benefit from football ecosystems of other countries that have nurtured talents that we call our own, but for all intents and purposes are not really our own. You know what I mean? Somebody's grown up in Italy, mother maybe just happens to be Ugandan. So we say, hey, yeah, come on, have a kickabout with us. Somebody's grown up in the UK, somebody's lived somewhere else. The nutrition, the food they've eaten to become the great footballer they are, the system, everything about them, the infrastructure is not of Uganda, but we call upon them to our ranks and they raise our level. They raise the floor when they come here. So our national teams look better than we actually are. But this CHAN, this is a proper reflection of what...
But I want to put a rejoinder in a few seconds, maybe 10.
Yes, Mr. Daka.
No African country today has the ability to develop a player to their peak.
Mm.
The Moroccan team that reached the semi-finals of the World Cup had one player who had been developed in Morocco. Just to emphasize, and they have structures, they have the resources. Egypt do, Morocco do, Algeria do.
Mm.
And I wanted to rejoice, but also to get to John that you cannot victimize Uganda. Currently, no African country has the ability to develop players to their full potential. None.
Yeah.
And it's down to coaching, to facilities, to the reach of football. Because the first thing, for example, FIFA will be looking at when they come to a country, they'll look at the number of footballers you have. Let's just say how many footballers in an organized system we have. Uganda today, I would imagine FIFA anywhere around 10 to 20,000, and that number is small. We need maybe to have 3 million footballers in a system. Forget Kenneth walking out of here, dropping his tie, and then jumping onto some astroturf on his way home. Those are not the ones we are talking about. The ones in a footballing structure that is known by an FA in a country. In many countries, in a country like Brazil, reports indicate that you have at least 12 million footballers in the football ecosystem. So because the margins of success in sport are so small that an academy like Barcelona opens in the 1970s and only produces Messi after 40 years. Because the margins are so small, you get 300 footballers into a football system or a coaching class, and you're lucky if you get 2 who excel. So the filter through is so small that in the end, for countries like us who have not even invested in the science and all the other things around the game that are still banking on natural talent, our margins of failure are higher than the margins of success.
All right. Yeah. Let's go to Darren. We've heard from John and Isma here explaining why the Uganda Cranes performed the way they did, and I know or largely you do agree with them. But now let's look at what actually ails Ugandan football. What exactly is the problem? Why are we not doing what others are doing?
Wow. Where do I start? Because when Uganda doesn't perform well against a team like Algeria, it's a culmination of so many things that I don't think Spectrum can cover. What you see on the field of play is only representative of the amount of work that's got to be done across a period of time. The team you see today has probably been built over the last, 8 or 10 years, the team that you currently see today.
The Uganda Cranes?
Yes, because I'm looking at a player who is the oldest player in that setup, probably Yunus Sentamu, in terms of experience, the striker, because he played at the 2014 edition in South Africa. And when you look at the final score of Algeria 3, Uganda 0, even with Uganda being co-hosts, it doesn't explain what the footballers in Algeria go through, the systems they go through, basically the entire structure that builds a player. And then we've reached an era where the players alone are not enough. You've got to build another system beyond the field of play for a team to go and win a game. I think when Uganda improved logistically, they managed to pick points away from home, and that's why Uganda qualified for the Africa Cup of Nations in 2017 and 2019, because somehow Uganda would pick more than a point on the road, which many other teams that would qualify for AFCON kept doing. So that was a bit logistical, including a chartered flight here by the president to fly Uganda direct. I think the fact that we had manpower at the helm of continental football that actually requested for Uganda to play an extra day later, something that had never happened before. I think the opening qualifier match for Uganda were in Cape Verde, because Uganda, I think, had a challenge with connection to get to Cape Verde. And guess what? Uganda wins the game in Cape Verde. I think Geoffrey Serunkuma scores the goal. From then on, it was an easy qualifier. What was the end result? Uganda eventually made it out of the group in Egypt, because so many things were put into perspective, were put into context. Now, when you come back to the result here, that Uganda 0, Algeria 3, on the pitch it looks 3-0. Probably, in real life, it could be Algeria 100, Uganda 0. Outside the 90 minutes of football, it could be Uganda 0, Algeria 100. But within the 90 minutes, because it's limited, 11 against 11, when you move to the other sectors of society, because they all play into what you see on the field of play. How you eat, how you condition. You've talked about the weight of the leagues. What does Constantine in Algeria do that KCCA doesn't do, or Vipers doesn't do? Because Constantine has beaten Vipers here before, from Algeria in the CAF Champions League. What does KCCA do that a team like, is it Belouizdad, the side from Algeria as well, does not do? Because the teams I'm talking about from Algeria regularly play CAF Champions League, CAF Confederations Cup football. And that's why I said the show may not be enough. But in brief, what we've summarized over time, it's infrastructure, funding,
administration, and society.
And the society itself.
Yeah.
Because
I've actually written down that diagnosis in my head, the way Darren has stated it. First, I think infrastructure is the biggest challenge.
When you say infrastructure, what are we looking at?
We have no places where children can go and express themselves, because the game that you see at the national team does not start there. It starts with an 8-year-old just falling in love with running around with the ball. But in many places, we are just going to walk through our malls and apartments, and there isn't a place to play. So children cannot even find what they want to do.
So we cannot unearth some hidden talents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So children have to go out and play. Administration, which also includes coaching. I think over time we've had largely terrible sports administration, and not just football. The people think for the game do not actually think for it. But also, it hasn't helped that because sport does not pay, it does not attract the best brains. That someone who has an idea of how to build a structure of an organization is better off joining Total or MTN than dedicating their time to sport. Yet sport needs brains that think. If Einstein did not say energy is MC squared, what else would we know about energy now? Exactly. So we do not attract the best brains in administration. So we need to start to attract those brains.
Do we have qualified people here in sports? In some countries, they even teach sports science and such things.
Well, I think it's even beyond sports science per se. It's management. Management itself is a whole other aspect. You don't need to be in the sports field to be a good manager of a sports organization, but being able to manage administrative units. And administration is so important in this country. It's for the same, almost, actually, if you look over the last 5 years, for example, the last 5 seasons of football, when you see Vipers winning, most of the time it's because KCCA, Villa, and Express have come apart at the seams. They have self-destructed.
When Express
are going through a phase of some disorganization in the administration. When Express actually get their heads screwed on straight, get a good, get the president who has time for the club,
they will win the league.
General KK, appoints a CEO, appoint somebody to actually do the physical conditioning in Helen Butele. They move from relegation threatened to winning the title the next season. The next season there's a problem at the top, and the club drops in the middle of the table.
Spiral.
SC Villa, same story. They get their house in order for a bit, just 3-6 months. They win the title. They lose it. The coach moves out of Uganda, and then everybody throws their toys out of the pram, and they drop again. So that just shows you how important governance is.
All right, staying with you, Torachi, a little bit on the issue of governance. There's been an argument that probably we need to move to a stage where the people who actually manage football sort of recruited in a professional manner, rather than having a system where people actually compete as if it's a political process. Because a FUFA office is elective, and the person sometimes who has money and influence will eventually emerge, even if they do not have the experience to do so.
Yeah, but like Isma pointed out, really, for money talks and not to put...
Do we need to change that system,
bovine
maybe?
excrement works. So you cannot invite somebody who's got earning, say, 10 million shillings per month in a nice cushy job with nice benefits, and you tell them to come to the stressful world of sport without budgets, people flying by the seat of their pants, everything, having to deal with all manner of things, including witchcraft. It's complicated.
So there's even witchcraft.
Yeah.
But Kenneth here is assuming that FIFA would exist in a system that is different
Yes.
from FIFA, from football, because
Well,
remember,
I'm seeing what happens with the FA in the UK, one of the best leagues in the world that we follow. Yeah,
but they don't manage that league.
But they are
They provide
managed by-
referees.
They
It's
provide
managed
referees
by
by
a
They're
company.
managed by the clubs.
Yes.
The clubs have a company called the Premier League that
And they
manages.
hire professional
So
managers.
Whatever they hire, their professional managers.
Today, the thing though is that the system that football has set up globally allows once Kenneth to run his hardware shop, then get off his profits and invest in a club. When you invest in a club from the 5th division, because FIFA today has 5 layers of football management, and then a junior league, and then 2 layers with the women. Then you must get money out of your hardware shop, get your hard-earned profits, invest in a team called Idudi United. Idudi United goes through the layers, then you get a bit of clout. That's when you rise to get to the level of being a leader at FIFA. Thereafter, what has changed, I think, over the past, you could say about 20 years, is that because FIFA has given federations a lot more money, they are now hiring professionals. I cannot sit here, for example, and claim Ahmed Hussein is communications director at FIFA, does not qualify for the job. He does, and there's several like him. However, their influence in a system that allows those with a bit of cream on their hands to be the leaders, they can only influence the sport as much, because in the end, you do not have as much of an influence, however much a professional you might be. Let's say you are an excellent person in data analytics of players and muscles and what the things that are important, what you see on the pitch. You do not have as much an influence on the game as Lawrence Mulindwa, whose bottomless pockets have lifted the club from where we didn't know, because Munamwaya were nowhere before he
obscurity, really.
from obscurity to where he is. And we are talking about, for example, someone who is the biggest investor in sport in our lifetime. So how then do you balance Kenneth Lukwago, who owns 5 arcades in the city and is willing to invest in his club, vis-a-vis someone else who is a governance expert?
Yeah.
In the end, we'll have the guy with cream on their hands because they are going to move things.
Darren, you brought us into this discussion of management. What's wrong with the management of football in Uganda?
Wrong? Tough one. But if I'm to put it into perspective, for starters, there are pros and cons. It can't be only what's wrong. In part, I've felt there's been a tremendous shift in the administration of football at the helm. This, whether you like Moses Magogo or not, there's been a significant shift to the level of the number of professionals that we're talking about who've risen in sport, the improvements in coaching, several other things, to the extent that they actually lured the rest of the region to bring this particular tournament that has since turned around your show into one for sports. Because the idea wasn't mooted by Kenya or Tanzania. It was mooted by Uganda, that eventually, I think Magogo himself, eventually they push, and that's how they win the rights to host the AFCON, and as a dress rehearsal, they get Chan as well in the process. And while there have been those strides that have been made, I think there have been shortcomings too. I think the 3 of us here, except you, we've got to a point where there is a general consensus that sport is a mirror of society. Even if we say there's a problem with the administration at the federation, probably it's the best amongst us.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get my point. That even if you look around, probably we are worse than those who are up there, in one way or another, as a society. And not to peg it to the individual aspects, but FIFA and football are only a subset of our society. So there's pretty much what we all desire is FIFA to do something outside the circle that is Uganda, which is impossible.
We're looking for an isolated center of excellence.
I'll tell you, one of the training facilities I think is Kadiba. Where I've
down
been.
in Mengo.
Yeah, because in late May they opened officially with the Uganda Cup final between Vipers and KCCA, and I think after leaving the locker room I ran there. And because I've had experience to be at so many other training facilities for other major championships, one thing I realized most is the security of the place, because it's more like it's within a really remote suburb, but probably a real place for football, for African football. Where African football starts is where Kadiba is, because it's not in a space that is quite spacious or anything. And then you realize, how did they get the land? It came from a church, and the church donates, and then FUFA puts up a structure, support from FIFA, eventually because of Pamoja and Chan energies, the government funds it, and it's now become a real place where you can have even a Uganda Premier League game or even an under-20 fixture. And not to digress really much, everything else that you desire FUFA to do, one, the funding, look at the funding. There could be, yes, many will argue, perhaps there is mismanagement of resources. There is there's been talk of not having a talent come through, that you have players who come through, but then the entire process to go through, somehow, it goes beyond FUFA. You reach a point where you realize, okay, now it's beyond FUFA. What are the clubs doing, for instance, like the 16 clubs in the Uganda Premier League? What are they exactly doing? Because they hold the talent that you're seeing on the field of play. NEC, Chitara, KCCA, Vipers, Villa. They have actually much more responsibility than FUFA. You know why? Because they are more in the kitchen, and FUFA perhaps is only creating a good environment, that you must have a good kitchen, you must have... But the people cooking, in particular, all right, it's down to the clubs. Where do the clubs come from? A Kenneth Lukwago like you, who owns 5 arcades, or an Ismail, who is running a school somewhere along Entebbe Road. All right. Just on the record, Dakaba talked about arcades I own in Kampala. You've also talked about it. On record, I don't own an arcade in this city. Let's go for a break now. When we return, we'll continue our discussion about Ugandan football as we seek for ways to actually improve it. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. But keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. We're glad that you're still with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Today we are looking at football development and management in our country, and I have 3 gentlemen here who have their experience as writers, pundits, and people who closely follow sports issues in our country. Mr. Ismail Dakawachigongo is the head of sports at Nation Media. Mr. John Torach, he hosts the sports talk show, The Locker Room, on Radio 1 FM 90. And Mr. Darren Alan Cheyune, he's a sports journalist with Nation Media. Now, during the break, the discussion continued, and it seems all the guests here in studio seem to suggest that the challenges that we are looking at are far beyond football, that it could be a society problem. And I want to begin with you, John. What exactly is the problem with the society that links up to football?
There are many things I would say. But one of the things I think as a society we lack, and I say this a lot, is we lack what we call lugezigezi in Uganda.
We lack or we have?
No, we lack.
We lack.
We are not enough of wiseacres.
Or sophistication?
Yes, we are not
sophisticated.
Yes, we are not sophisticated as a society.
We simply like it easy.
And we lack the ability to discern the good stuff. And when you stick out as part of the good stuff, you're frowned upon, and you're said to have lugezigezi. And yet that's how the best societies build the best things, by wanting the best every time and not taking a step back from what it is that they want. And football, like we said, frankly speaking, they're doing the best with what they've got. I don't think we've had a better, even as we're talking about football governance, I don't think we've actually had a better football administration in the last 40 years like the one we've got now. And maybe in a way it's a blessing if we follow through, like say, and I'd say this is pretty direct. We have a chance to do the unthinkable and actually turn around things if somebody like Magogo actually decided to do something about it, because he has the security of tenure. I think we can all agree that nobody is going to be getting Magogo's position in the foreseeable future. Nobody has pulled out rabbits out of the hat like he has done.
Isn't that the problem?
I wouldn't call it a problem. Security of tenure is a good thing for long-term planning. Ask the Chinese. When you always budgeting for 5-year cycles, ask rugby. It never goes well. So, you want to be able to plan for 10 years because, for example, to take a team to the World Cup, you have to plan for 10 years. You have to start
Minimum.
looking minimum.
Mm.
The title you saw France winning in '98. Those were plans for 10 years. And all these nations, when they pull off some of these incredible sporting achievements, these are usually plans for 10 years. When you talked, Isma talked about children starting to play around at about 8. If your children are not playing actively at 8, they are not going to be ready for professional ranks at 18, because you need 10 years to perfect your art. You look at the Marcus Rashfords you're talking about here. He gets to the academy at 9, 10. He's put in 8, 9, 10 years. The Lamine Yamals, they'll put in 8, 9, 10 years before they're ready for the professional ranks. It's the spectacular ones who will make it in 8. But the majority need 10 to 12 years. So if you start late, like we usually do, by the time these professional ranks are ready to welcome you, you're too old. They're really not welcoming you. We start too late in many ways. We do not provide the structures for the children to start as early as they possibly could. And it's, as I said, it's a structural problem. And because our society, as I said, lacks rugezi, we have a very low flow of what's acceptable. We need to raise the flow of what's acceptable. You see, football is a team sport. And it's played by a team. You have an exceptional Alan Okello. So people are complaining that he had a rubbish game. Alan Okello cannot play alone. He cannot, he needs a midfield that's working to provide him with the ball. But to do that, you need a whole team whose level is raised. You need the flow of society to raise the level of football players we produce. We're talking about Brazil here producing players. Yes, they have poverty, but this is a society that produces jets. There's excellence in that society. They produce amazing aircraft. A society that can produce aircraft like they do.
They're in an era of transformation.
Not just that. This is a highly developed society. So even the footballers are going to benefit from that raised flow of performance of the society.
All right.
Yes, Darren. I just wanted to come to you, Anderson, and I don't know if this is feeding into your questions, because from what John states is showing you, we raise the floor as a society. Everything. He used the wiseacring bit, and it was painstaking at a point.
I felt like he wants to incite people.
One of the things that is embedded in our cultures, and which I'll tell you, to be honest, is our cultures raise us on soft grounds. I don't know if it's also with the food we eat, but there are many things that they come off really, really so soft. And you look at other cultures or other countries where people come from, and things are already hard. If you talk of Algeria, you talk of a country like Morocco, you don't know why. We'll bring it to a more clear example like Egypt. And Egypt will not joke with its agriculture, for example.
So it's a work ethic thing.
They're already disadvantaged. They don't expect 2 seasons of rain. The only water they have is coming from Uganda. So they'll send a military base here. Things are already hard, meaning their levels of reaction to life are already elevated. Someone who comes from the desert already knows I'm at a disadvantage.
They know what they want and how to get it.
Thank you.
That's what you're saying.
Now, when you come to Uganda, the things are a little bit different. It comes off laissez-faire. The president himself, I think, has said that even a fool does not sleep
a fool
hungry here.
can survive in Uganda.
And I don't want to say that they are fools somewhere, but let me put it into the context of football, that everything that you will see on the field of play, the players you will see, like I've told you, it's been an 8-year process, majority of them with stops. All the players you see on the field of play on Monday evening, through the entire 11, there are stops and starts for them. When you look at a country like China, when they won the rights to host the Olympic Games at the turn of the millennium, the first thing they did was to look for 8-year-olds. What was the end result in 2008? China topped the medal table at the Olympic Games because they looked also for the 12-year-olds who were turning 20 by the time, and they prepared and they went on to win the medals. If you look at the football, we are saying that there's an African country that Ismail said that can build a player entirely. Granted. But what are we doing to elevate those players to where they can be picked up from by other systems? Because it's no longer one that you stand and if you're at Radio 1, you've made it. You need so many things to get the best players to come through.
All right.
And unfortunately, even when Hoima is complete, even when Akibo is done, there are a lot more things that will be required to be done because infrastructure alone will not be enough.
All right. Let's go to Dakawa now. Dakawa, we are moving towards the end of this discussion, but we also have feedback from the listeners. Given an opportunity to advise, how would you deal with all these challenges? What do we need to touch in order to go to the next level?
One of the things that is a very important unit in our society, and maybe not in others, is family. We need to be deliberate about speaking to parents. I don't know whether in school or wherever, to encourage them to allow their children to play, to start with. I'm always at pains when I go to my children's school, and sometimes I'm the only one who complains about homework because I find it to be
That
too
it's
much.
too
when
much.
when children are not playing. And one parent called once said that we should pray for our children to stop being lazy because I complain about the amount of homework. But my point there was that I needed them to do something besides the classroom, because out of the kind of exposure our children have that we did not, I think I went to school to get a clerical job. But that was a generation for my parents who were taught by the colonialists.
Yeah.
And that's what they wanted them to do. Today, you're very likely to find your child, Kenneth, telling you they want to be a footballer or a musician. And how do you enable them? They are more likely.
Mbappe is the role model.
Yeah, their role models are totally different. Ours were
Their role models are musical guys on TV.
musical guys. Yeah, yours was the neighbor who had 7 white shirts on the line every Sunday because he worked in the bank. If you saw him on the road every day, you thought he had 1 white shirt,
Yeah.
but he had been trained to do a clerical job. So I think one of the things we need to do, and this goes beyond the federation, we need to encourage people, first of all, to get involved in sport. 2, for those who are already involved, the clubs that are there, we need to get Corporate Uganda involved. Whenever Moses Magogo makes a case, and he has been on this crusade for a very long time about government funding and all, we've eventually moved from 0 to 17 billion, which is given to FUFA for the national teams. There is a way Corporate Uganda could support sport much more. There is a way, and some of this has to be deliberate. This cannot be FUFA, this has to be government. The kind of money they invest in CSR, if you made sports CSR, that's one way. When you watch television, even clubs in the 3rd or 4th tier in Europe have sponsors on their jerseys.
They do.
And I've learned over time that some of these it's just a restaurant, a coffee shop in the community that feels obliged to support Leyton Orient, or Wrexham in the neighborhood. I think we need to get this kind of support to these clubs, because these clubs still depend on people, on people's goodwill. In the end, Corporate Uganda has to get involved. We need more companies to improve the funding. Maybe finally, we need, the world calls them coaches. I'd rather say we need more teachers of sport. We've improved the quantity over time. FUFA has trained a lot more coaches. However, they are not having an impact because either they are not getting opportunities, or we've gone the quantitative approach and not the qualitative one. So we are not having a lot of good coaches filtering through. I would easily sit here and argue that today we might all pick stones and throw at Molevie Kwaso. I'm not a big fan of his as a person, as a coach, because I think he has many shortfalls. But I look around and I cannot even make a case for another person to be in charge of a team. Yeah, so can you imagine that predicament? Yeah, you go to the ballot and you find 7 candidates and you can't vote any. And if you tear the ballot paper, you might be arrested. Now, that's the case where we are with football. Molevie Kwaso is national team coach. I cannot make a case for him, but I cannot even make a case for 10 others to be in that position. So how then do we need to increase, we grow the numbers of coaches to such voluminous levels that the good ones will eventually filter through. For me, that would be a very, very good starting point.
Being a football coach should be normal in society. Being a qualified football coach should be normal in society. If maybe I could as well add
very quickly
the pull and push factors as well pertinent. That's why I said really society plays a huge factor. If I don't know, Anderson, if there was a weekend that came and let's say there is a game, let me use actually KCC Vipers in Lugogo. Your favorite artist is close by in Lugogo across the road. there is a fashion show. There's a movie, a Ugandan movie, being launched, let's say, at the National Theatre or the big cinema at one of the malls. I don't know, where would you opt to go? Or where would a listener opt to go?
Would the movie be called 60 Years of Bananas? Or the bananas stopped at 30?
You know, if you just imagine that on a particular Saturday, where do people go? Because this is what happens. And the fact that we've had a chance to experience different cultures, all of us here through sport, and people go to different places, you'll actually find, because there is a football game on a Friday evening, there can't be a concert in the same place in a particular society, because the subsector called sport is heavily elevated to a particular level. And it probably all goes down to the money.
All right.
When there's more money in football, in sport, even you, the Kenneths, will pick up your suits and you'll come to football.
All right. Let's now go to the listener and hear what they're actually saying about this whole issue. And we have a couple of messages coming in via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. I'll read out a couple of messages because there are quite many. Here we begin with Albert Wandera, who writes and says, Ken, Uganda League is so consumed in sports betting to an extent that sports journalists always sweep it under the table. We always play boardroom football. I am also disappointed to see one of the betting companies sponsoring this tournament when having active fraud case in court. Well, that's another issue there. Uganda should take heart over the loss to Algeria. It's not all lost. We should not crucify the players and officials yet. In 2014, host and soccer powerhouse Brazil lost 7-1 and emerged the winners. That's Abok Fred there with that comment. Am I the only one who thought Uganda did real well despite the result? We can bounce back. Cote d'Ivoire struggled in the last AFCON but went on to win it. We should still rally behind the boys because they can still deliver the result. Leicester came from the championship to win the EPL despite the giants in the league. That's a comment from Moses. To the panelists, why don't we have our own Ugandan players in the top 5 European leagues despite the promising talents like Alan Okello? Our players homesick. Is it a language issue? Good evening, Kenneth and the guests in studio. I have a question for Ismail Kigongo. Why FIFA can't give funds security at Nambole? People there have been beaten and their items stolen. That's a comment from Kabanda. Albert writing, if Magogo was not an MP, did not have a wife who is a speaker, would we get the games here? Basically, how much has political power played and influenced football for the bad and good in the country? Anderson, you can't believe that football clubs in Uganda Premier League toil through a whole season for a winner to come out with only 60 million. And for the cranes, people, including the president, will come in at the last day with cheap political promises. Uganda will not win a single game in their group. That's Sharif there. And that group has Guinea, South Africa, and Niger in that particular group. David writes in and says, why Uganda Cranes lost the game? How many members of Uganda Cranes team are university or high school students? Are the panelists aware that in 1978, when Uganda reached Africa Cup of Nations final, Dennis Obua, former FIFA president, was an A-level student. What makes it difficult for FIFA and clubs to identify and source talent from secondary schools and universities? Where is the National Council of Sports in this, and how do they relate and interact with FIFA in talent identification? Well, the comments are so many. Well, gentlemen, let's first respond to this, and we'll see if time will allow us to take more.
If I could just start off with the last thing you actually pointed out. One of the things I have big, and that's why I was talking about raising the floor of what our society is. And I think one of the key things that has to be raised, I don't know if we have to copy the American system about this, but the academic side of the footballers as well. Those who are
sports and education.
Active footballers, I think FIFA needs to put their foot down on this.
Those American universities, you can actually study on sports scholarship.
Yeah,
and many here also are studying on sports scholarship.
They're here as well. They still, the thing is, what is expected of you, not just study as on a sports scholarship, but actually perform in class. If you do not perform in class, you do not get to play sport.
Yeah.
And that affects the... You talk about the academic excellence of the players who reached the final. The time when Uganda won the rugby championship in 2007, Africa, you need to look at the caliber of the people in that team.
All right, Darren?
You will understand how important academics is in making a player a bet, because a human being plays football. You need to improve that human being. Academics and getting them through structure it's very, very key.
One of the things I think academic does is to instill the discipline.
And so many other things.
Sports
That's
too.
why these guys can't survive abroad. And if you look at all the players who survive abroad, look at them. Sekaja, Obua, name it. Pick out all the players of Uganda who have survived abroad. They've all had a pretty decent education.
All right. Darren, your quick response to some of these issues that came across from the listener?
There are quite many, but probably I'll move along the same line with John. I don't know if you could repeat a couple as we do come to the close of the show. But just quickly, like we stated here, that sport is a mirror of society. And I think this subset is too much embedded. And I don't know, many have argued here that probably we need to have a Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture rather than education and sports. And that's a whole long conversation beyond the four of us seated at this round table. Because at some point, it's going to be very difficult with the current education system you have to have a well-educated footballer to a certain level and still performing really well. Those are two masters.
Somebody
at the
asked
same
why
time.
we do not have our players in the top leagues of Europe, and he actually said, is
And
it
so
a
many
language
things-
issue?
So many things play into the line. When Farouk Mia left Vipers to join Standard Liège in Belgium, one of the reasons why he wasn't playing football immediately was because he was seated in a French class, learning French. One of the reasons. And there are many things that you put the aspect of education to.
All right.
But probably even the education structure needs to change to allow sport thrive.
All right.
Because if you understand the structure the way it is today,
Yes.
it can only push you to be a very good engineer and not a footballer with some education.
All right. Spectrum, Mobiru Tanka, Pole Uma, Paul Sally, Dennis Obua, Jimmy Kirunda, Leo Adra, Filippo Mondi. Where did that crop of footballers come from and where did it go? That's a comment from Fred Aboki there. Another comment, how many tertiary institutions, secondary schools and districts have football pitches and active football teams today in Uganda? Yet during Amin's time, my county of Bufumbira had an active football team that used to engage in football matches within Uganda and our neighbors Rwanda and DR Congo. Dakaba, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
Someone there calls for Idi Amin to return. I don't know that.
This is the happiest you've been on this show.
I would almost make the same claim, but only if I didn't have a microphone. I think everything that can solve sport, for me, is summarizing the things we stated. Those things that people mentioned. It was maybe easier to thrive when Polio Uma played in the 70s because the sport was not even sophisticated. There wasn't this science. There weren't video analysts, for
easier to
example.
make it way up
was
there.
make it.
But
now,
but
we need
when
to
you
do the
but
things
when
that
you
the
look
world-
at the caliber of those players,
Yeah.
they were giants.
They-
I can tell you.
There's our friend Yusuf Cheyunechuni says part of the problems that has made our players thinner and shorter is the use of family planning pills. we need a scientist to explain that. Yeah, maybe a scientist needs to help because it says those guys were giants because women were not on all these things, and that
they are
can be
not.
even derogatory.
Yeah, I think there was talent spotting. Try to identify
but besides
identify
that-
physicality.
Yeah, besides all that, but also to make it to the top there, at that time, one, the population was much lower, implying, inevitably, it's easier to make it to the top. But two, at the time, there were so many other foreigners who are still within the systems
Yeah.
that helped push things through.
To move the
And
sport.
the interest from the government
So the
was
colonial
inevitably
aspect was still there.
Yes.
The flow of our society was higher. You just need to look at the Hansard of that time.
The debate in the
And
house.
the debate in the house.
Yeah.
When you look at the
the
debate now,
debate today.
you can
Yeah.
laugh.
But for me, we can summarize everything from where we started. Infrastructure, sporting infrastructure. Someone mentioned tertiary institutions not having stadiums and all these kind of things. We talked about administration, the quality of people who run the game. How many do we have? Do we have 50,000 Ugandans who are educated about sports, running sport in this country? 3, funding. Does Lukwago feel a responsibility that if he owns a hardware shop in Kasubi, can go and support Kasubi FC
And-
with some
and
of the
get
return?
yeah.
Then society, would Lukwago let his child play sport over nights with feet in a bucket to try and be the best engineer
which he may never even get a chance
To go through chemistry paper 2.
Well, gentlemen, let's do this another day. Time is not our best ally. We have to bring this discussion to an end. Thank you so much for sparing your time to be here with us. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for tuning in. Continue to support the Uganda Cranes, and eventually, like one listener said here in a message that I did not read, we will get there. Up next, the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, the Soul Train with PB Jr.